Um, Not to put you in the awkward position of being between me and spring break, but just kidding. I have more things left on the Friday. Um, we have some new guidance from the state, and so I'm going to kind of start with that and say that last week we ended off discussing the steering committee and really getting our brains going on what we need to lead this effort until we heard quite a bit of information. And so today I'm going to just go over the website from the state. I know we mentioned that they have one. I'm going to throw it in the chat now, but I'm actually going to share my screen in just a second here and just show you all some of the information that they have for us, and as well as the Q&A section that they have. Basically from the webinar that they held, I noticed some of the questions are directly from the webinar. And so some of the questions that maybe they weren't able to answer in that moment are included on the website. So if you don't mind me sharing my screen here, you can see the regional K-16 website from the state, powered by the Foundation for California Community Colleges. Basically has all the information we already know for the most part. The program, what you need to qualify. We have the information from the bill language, phase 1 versus phase 2 collaboratives. And then they just released not only the recording from the webinar, but also the self-assessment checklist. And so this is just a list of things that the program needs to have for phase 1. And this just came out a few days ago. And I will just in a few moments here, after passing over some of this information, pass it over to Carlos to talk a little bit about what this means for us. And so some of the things that the state wants us to have in order to be complete for the phase 1 round of funding is knowledgeable about other consortia doing similar work in the region. And by the way, now that SURF is being mentioned, I have to say that, don't have to, but I really want to say that IEGO is having an informational session in partnership with the state about SURF just right after this call at 10 o'clock. So if you're interested in that effort, just in a moment here, I'll send a link in the chat to register if you have time at 10 to join and learn more about SURF, Community Economic Resiliency Fund. Collaborative has a convening organization that facilitates and manages activities of the collaborative, has a fiscal agent able to execute contracts and process payments, been in operation for at least 3 years, and made demonstrable progress towards some identified goals, has a steering committee with executive level participants from the partner entities, and at least, again, the 25% representing local employers, and a clear plan for expanding to meet the requirement. And we know that we should have each of the sector campuses, at least the public sectors of education, and then the K through 12 districts in our case, participating should be using CCGI and starting to integrate with the Cradle to Career data system. So that's the new information from the state. I also want to point you over to, if you go to the website, you go to this top right corner and you press on FAQs, there is a ton of information here for everyone. And so this is just, as I mentioned before, FAQs from the webinar, but I imagine some of the questions that folks are asking in between. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll say that there's some interesting information in here that of course, we're looking at and incorporating, but encourage you to go through and look at just the same. So that's kind of a very brief, kind of quick and dirty of the website and how you can navigate that and some of the new information that we got from the state. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Carlos to talk a little bit about how this information might affect us and how institutional leaders might play a large role in the future of this.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael, for that introduction, and welcome everybody to our Friday meeting. So on Tuesday morning, the state released this information. We reviewed it, found very interesting information in here about the formation of the steering committee. And we also reached out to the folks in Fresno to have conversations about, their steering committee and how their steering committee is set up. And it raised more questions, and it raised more opportunities for us to think about how we are going to proceed as we begin to move forward in this work. I want to start my conversation by saying that the purpose of what we are trying to do is to create a structure or structures that we can have here in the IE that will allow us to continue to further this work with time. And the work that I'm referring to is in this particular case is about empowering people, youth in particular, to find the right kinds of opportunities for them to better their skills so that they can go out and get jobs that are living wage jobs, and that through education we'll be able to create an economy in the IE that brings prosperity to everyone. And everyone in this group is working on pieces of that, right? There are groups of folks here who have pathways in place. We have groups in here who have support structures that support students as they navigate through systems. We have people in here working on apprenticeships. We have people in here working on developing entrepreneurial programs that all benefit this in this big plan moving forward. And the opportunity that's presented to us right now is this K-16 money. And I believe we are in a really good space for this. And I think that as we begin moving forward on this, we are going to find ways to position ourselves in such a way that we would be most effective in receiving this money. So the key thing that we learned in this last bit of information is that the steering committee needs to be made up of predominantly folks who are in the executive leadership positions of our institutions. So like the chancellor of UCR, the president of Cal State San Bernardino, the president of Riverside Community College, or the chancellor of San Bernardino Community College District. There's a group of people who need to be involved in this work. And the reason why they need to be involved in this work, we need to make sure that their vision is in line with what the vision of our work is that we are trying to do here. And we need to make sure that they commit their efforts and align their efforts to this work. And that's the push of this K-16 collaborative, is to be able to do this. Now, last week we came up with a whole group of folks who we feel would be really important to serve on the steering committee, and I continue to believe that that's absolutely true. We need to really rethink now, how we approach that steering committee, and how we build that steering committee to include this other group of folks in that work. And what's interesting is that we spent a lot of time dissecting the model that they have in Fresno. And we are actually, in some ways, really further along than them, in that what we have already in place is an understanding that it takes more than just the presidents and the chancellors of these institutions to make these pathways work and move forward. It takes the workers, the people who do the work, but it also takes other kinds of institutions, other kinds of organizations as well, not just those presidents. But we need a president's commitment, her decision that she is going to align her strategic plan to this work, allow her folks in her area to focus on this. So we need to bring this into alignment. So I had a conversation with Kim Wilcox. He's the chancellor of UCR, and I had a conversation with Tomas Morales about this. And they are under the belief we need to form a steering committee, and the formation of the steering committee is, we will need to bring into this space, those folks that I mentioned, plus we need to bring in some K-12 superintendents. We'll bring in folks from the county offices as well, but we need to bring in some K-12 superintendents into the steering committee, and we need to think about the values that we want for this work. So our planning team, the folks, Michael, ourselves, and Jackie, and Juliana, and others, we're putting the steering committee conversation on hold right now as we continue to find out more information. I am going to continue to advocate to bring in other voices other than just those of the highest level administrators into this work, because I think that's crucial for the work that we have. We need to do moving forward. And I think we have a few minutes for questions, right, Michael?
We sure do.
I urge you to look through all those materials.
I'm wondering if this is Emily from UCR, Carlos, has there been conversations yet at this point about who's potentially going to be the lead fiscal agent?
I brought this up at one of my GIA board meetings, and what I heard of several of the folks that are most likely going to serve on the steering committee, someone like Kim Tomas, Chancellor Isak from Riverside Community College District. The steering committee is not the GIA board. It's a different, GIA board has a different function. The steering committee is going to be constituted differently with a different focus. What was really powerful, I thought, was that in that conversation, the idea that, there are multiple agencies that potentially could do this. And what we have to be able to do in the region is build capacity across regions, so that we can begin to spread this knowledge and skills to other places. And the conversation that we had at the board meeting specifically about the LEA was the idea that it may not be the likely candidate, right? We know already that the UCs in many of the other surf regions are leading this work. And Kim proposed that the idea that we consider somebody else to make us look different, to make us look more, make us look like we understand that we need to make these connections with other organizations, and so that's still in flux. That conversation. I threw out the idea of San Bernardino Community College District as the potential lead agent. There's some change going on there now. There's some opportunity there now. I think that might be a really good case for that. So that's what I know, Emily. I know we need to get that because we need to get aligned and ready to move forward. Deadline's coming. Other questions? I'm really interested in hearing more from you all about this. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, to talk to me. I need to hear your voice and advocate for you. We do know that in the Fresno model, there are private university presidents sitting on the steering committee. Fresno does not have any kind of CBO representation on there. I think that's something that we are going to really advocate for and push for, and to make us different, because we know we need to have those things in place. Other ideas?
James has his hand up.
James.
This came up in my conversations on my campus, and can you just clarify the expected time frame and sort of the annual amount that we're talking about. And I think this sort of, we sort of skirted around this issue, but like, for example, my School of Education is going after some Gates money directly and doing some other things, and they feel like, oh, well, we don't have time to do that and do this. So I'm like, here I am representing my campus. But as I said before, I think the value of this is much beyond, it's not about the money. We can't be seen as chasing the money. We're using the money as a way to draw ourselves together and create this collaborative, which I think has to be super clear. And I'm very comfortable with that. But I think in privates, where we're facing, and some of the community colleges where we're facing severe budget constraints, I have the freedom to do that because I'm a faculty member, but getting administrative time to do that is tough because they're just dealing with, one crisis after another, which is why I'm not an administrator. But it would be helpful for me just to say, well, what's the total package here? And then I think we're still in the prioritization phase, right? We don't really know how that's gonna cast out. And I don't know that I need any direct money on that. But for example, we tend to like things like scholarships, because then that funds people, not programs. But programs are great too. So I feel like we're still in this flux. Would you agree that we don't really know yet? We know approximately that it's going to be like, what, 25 million, but over 4 years?
That's correct.
That's the number that I'm heard.
Yeah,
So
I think the number is closer to 20 that we'll be able to advocate for our region. And I think you hit on, I think, the most important opportunity that we have with this resource coming down the line. It's a way to organize ourselves and think of the structures, the structures that we can create to be able to be very effective as other resources come down the line to support this work. And I anticipate that the work of the steering committee is going to be about making decisions about the support to the pathways and decisions like that. And that having as many of the educational leaders who have a similar vision to participate in the work, I think that's going to be really important, James. And having the president of University of Redlands as a potential person to sit on the steering committee, I think is something that I personally would advocate for, because they play a key role. There may be some for-profit organizations that I would be more skeptical of, but a public nonprofit would fits into that model. And I think it is a commitment, and it's a commitment to this work. And so I really like the way that you framed that, James. Michael, do we have any other folks?
I'm not seeing any yet, but we do have a little bit of time for this discussion or Q&A. So if folks have thoughts or questions, I encourage you to ask. Graciela, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Michael. Like how you said, I'm yearning for spring break too. But I think I'm just curious, because how would this affect the structure that we have right now? Like, will this affect the discussions that we have on Fridays? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, Graciela, frankly, I don't know. What I do know is that the steering committee structure, that discussion that we had, really identified for us as a region some of the important things that we think are important to have as we begin to move forward in this work. And so the way that I think this is going to play out is that we need to bring in this group of folks who are required for this grant, and then we need to think about how we can take that, take what we learned there and take what we've learned here and find some new space to kind of connect things together and still keep it in a workable group. And I think that's what we need to have more discussions about and talk about more. I personally you know, I know that my team will not be happy with me, but I personally believe that, you know, we need to have advocacy at all levels, and having a student representative on this work is going to be key. And I just want to let everybody know, as an aside, that I had a conversation with the folks from the Center for Social Innovation at UCR, you know, there's this idea we're beginning to hatch around creating a student movement in this region. We're trying to find ways to be able to do that, Graciela. So please get offline to me and have conversations, because I need to talk to you about that. Chinaka.
My understanding, Carlos, is that this proposal is supposed to go in sometime in May.
Yes.
Okay. So we've had this series of meetings. Is it possible for us to now establish a timeline in which we can say we want to get these people on board between this time and this time, and be able to at least map out the direction we are going? I feel that we have had sufficient meetings for some of us to really know where we're heading with this. I know there is still a lot of information that we need to get from the state, but is it possible to kind of give us a rough idea of how we go from today, March 18, to that date when this proposal is supposed to be submitted?
Yeah. So I am going to work on that. My previous timeline that I've been working under were under a different set of assumptions. But I was able to talk to several of the education leaders in this space since Tuesday when we got this information. And there's a couple of things that I'm working on to bring people together to begin narrowing down this steering committee. I'm still hoping that we can host our first meeting before April 1. When this gets released, we do know that we can, even if we apply for a phase 1, that we can continue, we can talk about making sure that we add all the partners as we move forward on this. So there's several decisions to make, but a timeline is a great idea that I can share with folks. I will work on developing something for next Friday. Thank you for that idea, Chinaka.
Carlos, so sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
I wanted to raise a question in the chat from Lisa. How do you see this funding being tied together with the 2 grants from the county that the county workforce are working on? Maybe it makes sense for there to be a common steering committee for the region for all 3 of the grants, since they're so similar.
Yeah, Lisa, I don't know which specific grants you're referring to. There are multiple ones that I've heard of in play. But we can have conversations about that. If you could inform me about that. Is this Lisa from Apple Valley? Okay, let's talk, Lisa.
This is Marianne from San Bernardino County Workforce Development. I oversee all of our regional projects, so I'd be happy to be part of a conversation. So there are 2 that we're in the process of submitting right now, and a couple of big ones we're waiting to hear back on. So.
Great. Marianne, can I ask you to get a meeting pulled together with you, Lisa, and I, and others who would like to attend?
Sure.
To talk about this? That'd
be
fantastic.
Is it okay if I also ask, what are the grant programs? Maybe I missed it.
The 2 that we are working on right now, one is an apprenticeship grant that's come out through the Department of Apprenticeship Standards. Riverside County is the lead for that one. It's due at the end of the month. We are working with the Launch Apprenticeship Network, so with Charles, and then a number of the colleges that have the apprenticeship programs. The other one we are working on is called Regional Equity and Recovery Partnerships. And that's one that's coming out as a collaboration between workforce boards and the community colleges. So the workforce boards apply, and by identifying programs at our local community colleges, they'll have the ability to access funding coming through the chancellor's office. And so we are working that one is due April 22nd. So we're in the process of identifying projects right now.
Who sits on the steering committee now, Marion?
We have an Inland Empire Regional Steering Committee, which is members of each of the workforce boards. That it's generally our chairs and our vice chairs, and then one other ad hoc person that's appointed by each of our chairs.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's lots of movement in the region when it comes to these grants with these and SURF and K through 16.
Integration and alignment.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should jump into pathways, Michael.
Sure.
Or you think we're ready?
I think we are. I'll do one last call for questions or comments, but I'm seeing none. So I think we might be ready to move on. Okay, so the next part that we have kind of prepared for you all is just the discussion as we kind of think about the steering committee and are going to move forward in that and hold that discussion for the future. We want to make sure that we're moving on the pathways. And so as you all likely know at this point, that there are 4 pathways: business, healthcare, engineering or computing, and education. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start breakout rooms in these 4 pathways in order to discuss, similarly to like what we did last week, what characteristics or perspectives do we want to be represented in the work groups for these pathways, and who specifically would you like to see as members of the work groups? And so we have folks ready to help lead that discussion for each of the pathways. And so join whichever one you feel most comfortable, or you can hang out in the main room with me if you so desire. And I'll be helping direct folks to where they need to go from here. But thinking about who we need to have in the room for the work groups as we build these out. As I was reading through the Q&A from the state, so I guess just very interesting is that we're ahead of this. We are ahead of where folks are expected to be in terms of starting these conversations about what do these pathways need. And so actually, you don't have to have it all figured out for the grant application, but as much as you can, I expect will support us and only help us in the application itself. But I think the second part to that is that one of the Q&A, one of the questions that was asked and answered was what parts of the application do they know, or something similarly along those lines. And one of the things that came out was that we should know how many people we hope to serve. And so that is a question we're also going to be seeking to answer in the next few weeks, as to how many people are we hoping to serve with these pathways, each individual pathway in the region. And obviously that's a large question, but we'll seek to serve that. Just kind of something interesting that came out of that Q&A page. So again, I encourage you to go ahead and read that. And with that, I hope it's okay if we start and open up the breakout rooms for the discussion on the 4 pathways. It looks like we have just about almost everybody back in, and we know that the surf call and information is about to come out there. But thank you all for engaging today. I took a peek at the Jamboards, and so it looks like the conversations were robust, looking at how many little sticky notes there are in these pages. So thank you all for engaging there. And I'm glad that I see that in the chat. Let me get you all the surf registration link. Give me just.
That's just what we're looking for.
Here you go, putting it in the chat. There's the link to register. I'm hoping it's not a unique link, or else that would go straight to me, but it should be good to go. All right, folks, thanks for engaging today. I see the question in the chat. Want to address that very quickly. How do I go about getting on the pathway committees for all the pathways that had breakout rooms? We are figuring that out as we speak. And so organizing today was kind of the start of organizing conversations. I think the best way to stay engaged is keep on returning to these Fridays. Feel free to engage with us outside of the meeting. And with that, we'll see you next week and see you on the next call.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you.